Hi, I'm Alfie Lariu with Astro Television in Malaysia. We have been using Omniscient Technologies' neural machine translation and subtitle management platform Media Studio for about 2 years now. And we recently ran a pilot using some advanced tools for audio transcription and something called screenplay dialogue extraction. And as part of that beta program, we ran a sizable number of hours to test the technology, and we're very happy with the results. So let me just talk a little bit about our journey with Omniscient Technologies' secondary tools, aside from machine translation. So to give a little background, I think the first exposure we had to Omniscient's ingenuity was at the beginning phase of creating our neural machine translation engines. We had the daunting task of matching, filtering, and identifying language sets for 400,000+ subtitle files, 10 years of subtitles that we had in our repositories that didn't match, that had poor language codes, poor naming, multiple languages within certain types of subtitles. Basically, a large amount of subtitles that needed a great deal of cleanup. And we brought this to Omniscient for some assistance, and they had just what we needed. They were able to devise subtitle pair matching that was basically identifying subtitles that had the same content, whether they were named the same way or not, identifying languages, whether the labels of those languages were correct or not, and identifying the character sets of the language within, distinguishing things like traditional from simplified Mandarin, or at the language level, identifying Indonesian text within what was supposed to be a Malaysian subtitle, and turned a huge, daunting task into an effortless and very low-cost process where they automated the entire end-to-end 400,000+ file matching that was then used to create our neural machine translation engines. And we were quite impressed with that because we realized that the task would have taken our staff inestimable effort, possibly weeks on end of just sifting through and trying to figure out which subtitles go with which subtitles and which languages are correct, and basically ending up with a lot of errors in the actual training material. So that was kind of our first exposure to their ingenuity and their problem-solving skills when it comes to language matching and building something that would solve a large volume of text matching on the fly. So that led to other conversations whereby we proposed that if we were to use speech recognition, would they be able to devise a way that would raise the accuracy? What they came up with was quite ingenious, and they proposed that we run a speech recognition pilot based on something that they call dialogue extraction, and that involved basically submitting 100 hours of content, which was up in the area of 290 shows, each one with an accompanying screenplay, which is not uncommon in our business, that content is delivered with the original language transcription, so that our localization services are able to make subtitles from the transcription, and there's not a lot of mistakes in the transcription process itself. So of that 100 hours of content, we had stand-up comedy, we had some singing and vocalist competitions, we had children's animations, and of the source screenplays, we had basically a varied set of different file types like PDFs, doc files, .txt files, Excel sheets, to name a few. A ragtag collection of different source files that had no formatting, that one didn't look like the other, coming from different sources, some from studios, some from third-party transcription services, some relatively loosely written, and some very, very detailed with a lot of camera instructions and interior, exterior indications, and just a lot of basically noise that you'd find in an actual on-set screenplay. So they ran their dialogue extraction. The dialogue extraction process is basically, it's an AI that will find patterns in a source text file that is then mapped out, and the process then goes over to the user to identify the portions that the AI has determined could be dialogue and portions that are most likely noise. And we found that this process was highly accurate, very intuitive to work through, and turned a highly manual process whereby usually what our linguists would do is they would copy paste by hand lines out of a screenplay into a blank subtitle and do the spotting. In other words, adding the time codes. This turned a lengthy process, which could take about 4 to 6 hours, I would say, into a 15-minute process that ran episode after episode once the original template files were created for each screenplay type. So in other words, they created a machine that detects where the dialogue is in just about any body of text, tacks on the dialogue speaker's name, and allows that to be run as a template to process a number of screenplay extractions that have a similar formatting. So if they all come from a certain studio or a certain third party, anyone that has been built in loosely the same way, has built their screenplay in that way, the machine will isolate the dialogue and enable the extraction process unmanned. So basically pulling out all the dialogue and queuing it up for the next step, which is the speech recognition matching. So just to recap a tiny bit, that 100 hours represented 290 shows, so 290 proxies that we ran through audio transcription. They devised a multi-layer ASR speech-to-text detection system whereby they are denoising, running through the AI services that they have found to be the best match for source types, and then matching that back to the dialogue extractions. So of the types of proxies that we ran for this pilot, we had, of course, the stand-up comedy, which normally in our experience, the comprehension level of an ASR would be moderate, and that was the case. The vocalist competitions, they were highly noisy. They had a lot of audience background noise, a lot of rapping, a lot of vocalizing. And for those who know speech-to-text technology, the moment you begin to sing, the speech-to-text breaks down because it's not matching with the phonetics models that speech-to-text are trained for. And we had the children's animation with heavy UK accents that were fairly good. So out of the ASR that we ran through, we saw that the performance margins were relatively average, what we would find, even though they have improved upon the process. We did see that ASR doesn't quite hold up to an unmanned process. So we had, for the stand-up comedy, about 50 to 60% of the text was accurate in terms of the transcription quality. The vocalist competitions were less than 20%. I would say that certain episodes would have been at the 5% mark. They were really terrible. And that's just the nature of vocalizing. And the children's animation was quite good with a 60 to 70% usable margin, probably due to low background, the low vernacular usage, the simple dialogue of children's animation to begin with. So we had feature text that was well time-coded, but would have needed to be post-corrected by human beings to lift up the accuracy from that 20% mark all the way up to 100, or from the 60 to 70% mark all the way up to 100. So still some hours of work to do. So what Omniscient did, they ran their ASR dialogue extraction to the ASR and raised the accuracy up to 95 to 100%. What this means is that if you picture your typical ASR, you'll notice that you will get consistent mishears, you'll get homophones, you'll get capitalization problems, punctuation, and you won't have any of the sophistication that you would get with a human being who is reading the speaker indications. So this process actually gave us the speaker splitting, which also helps their speech recognition because their technology is geared towards speaker identification. Their ASR is tuned to find speaker one and speaker two, whether that's a dialogue that's been tuned for a certain accent or for a certain gender or even just for a certain cadence. They're able to glean a lot of meaning from their automation in their ASR using speaker identification. And that process is assisted immensely from the dialogue extraction process, whereby they're tagging the actual speakers from the screenplay. So they're saying Michael is saying this text and Susan is saying that text, and their ASR is able to identify, yes, there's a male speaker here, there's a female speaker on that side. And what this basically amounts to is that the boundaries of each speaker are very well defined after the dialogue extraction matching, and all of the corrections from the text are carried directly to the subtitle itself. And that really gives you that 95 to 100%, that kind of missing link in the speech to text to subtitle dream automation. This is actually the completion of that. So keep that in mind, that 95 to 100%, that's an unmanned process. In other words, our linguists only had to correct the final 5% on speech recognition after having run the dialogue extraction and matched it to the ASR as an automated process. And that's a huge boost forward. So if you think about the effort it takes to produce an hour of manual transcription, we estimate that without a screenplay, our editors would take about 8 to 10 hours if they have a screenplay to work from. So imagine like US content, English content, and they're reading from the script and translating directly into a foreign language. That would be a 6 to 8 hour job. If they're creating an English transcription, that's even more time, because they'd still have to type in or copy paste all of that scripted dialogue into a blank subtitle and do the spotting. But with the dialogue extraction, ASR and human post edits were cut down to about a 2 to 3 hour process, keeping in mind that that's a 1 to 2 hours of human effort. What that means is that the time it took to upload the proxies, get back the resulting dialogue extraction and ASR subtitle, and then run through a 1 to 2 hour post edit in that amount of time, instead of 8 to 10 hours, 2 hours later, we had original language subtitles. So again, that's not an unmanned process, but it's a huge boost in productivity. And we're looking very much forward to having that as part of the update of our Media Studio in version 2. So can't say enough about Omnition's great products, their ingenuity, and as a localization and media and entertainment professional, really, really impressed with their technology, and very happy to have had this chance to endorse Omnition for their great work and their great ideas. Thanks very much, everyone, for listening.